Hey guys, I'm Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, and I'm based here in beautiful, sunny Southwest Florida. And today we take a look at the Feiyu AK4500 gimbal. It's a really impressive gimbal that includes a wide array or a whole bunch of accessories that are usually extra with other gimbal manufacturers. It has an impressive payload of just over 10 pounds, but does latest necessarily mean greatest? Because is this thing easy to set up? Is it easy to use? Does it give us really great results? But most importantly, is it worthy of its $750 price tag? Well, let's find out. Gimbals. These things are ubiquitous, literally everywhere. In fact, they're so common, sometimes it's almost refreshing and original to see a shaky shot. Everybody wants the smoothest and most cinematic footage, and it's been the goal of gimbal manufacturers to produce the smoothest panning, smoothest tilting, and 360-degree rotations as possible to achieve those smooth shots. Gimbal manufacturers have also been loading up the latest and greatest gimbals with an array of new features, like on the AK4500. Some of these features adding a whole lot of value, many making not that much of a difference at all. So, how does the AK4500 stack up? First up is build quality, and the 4500 is a truly impressive beast. It's made out of aluminum and it's solid. And because it's so solid, it's not exactly dainty. In fact, it comes in at 4.2 pounds in this configuration without a camera. Now, I guess that makes sense given that it has a 10.1 pounds of maximum payload. The main handle is grippy and rubberized and comfortable. The LCD screen, which is a touchscreen, initially kind of threw me off because I'm used to some kind of interface combination of both buttons and joystick on other gimbals. But the AK is primarily a touchscreen interface to get to the various options. There are two screw holes on the side here that allow for attaching the versatility arm and the remote control hand grip. And that's great, but it also means more weight. Like their main competitors, Feiyu has included these locking mechanisms that hold the axes in place, which makes for more ergonomic transport rather than having to fold it up and rebalance it each time you change the locations. The AK4500 also includes a quick release plate, which is Arca Swiss compatible. Additionally, we get an accessories box, which includes the following: the aforementioned versatility arm and a follow focus device. Personally, I don't use follow focus, at least not for the kind of shooting that I primarily do, but this versatility arm is a huge bonus because Feiyu includes a Bluetooth remote controller that fits neatly, this thing fits neatly into the arm, which makes for much easier, smoother panning, tilting, and rolling. Like many of the latest gimbals, the back here is angled, giving us unobstructed access to the camera screen. This obviously helps better compose your shots. The remote control gives you the ability to attach a monitor on the top here. It's a nice touch, assuming that you have a smaller monitor like the Ninja Blade. But again, this is going to add even more weight, and that's something you probably want to consider. All in, the build is very impressive. I do wish they used lighter weight materials, and I also wish there weren't so many screws to attach things. To me, it's just more bits and pieces to lose. But in the end, for build, the Feiyu gets a 9 out of 10. Next is ease of setup. And like many of the latest gimbals, your ability to balance and set up the AK4500 is quick and efficient because you can balance each axis independently thanks to these locks that hold one or two or all three axes in place, which is also great for transport. And once you're balanced, you can power up the gimbal. And one of the first things you're going to want to do is set the power setting based on the payload that you are putting on the gimbal. I found that getting to the power settings or the various power settings is much easier via the Feiyu app than it is the LCD interface. The power settings are based on levels from 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest. I like to think of these as 2-pound increments, so given that the max capacity is 10 pounds, 5 times 2 pounds is 10 pounds. In this setup with the A7R3 and the Samyang 14mm f2.8, it's a combined 2.5 pounds. This kind of puts it on the fringe between level 1 and level 2. But I found that level 2, or at level 2, the motors were vibrating noticeably, but at level 1, it was smooth as silk. Now, Feiyu recommended that I initially set the gimbal to auto on the power setting, but in my experience, I found that that didn't work that well because like at level 2, the motors were constantly vibrating. The next thing you're going to want to do is set up the versatility arm and the remote control. And to me, this is really what separates or sets the AK-4500 apart from the bulk of 3-axis gimbal devices available in the marketplace. Because once you're connected, you're gonna have to connect the remote control to the gimbal via Bluetooth. What you do is you press the setting button here on the side and then move the joystick to the right and follow the commands on the LCD screen. The LCD screen is tiny, so you might need a pair of glasses. Once you're connected, initially, you won't need to do it again because these two will automatically pair the next time you power up. There's also the option to add a follow focusing device, which Feiyu again includes as an accessory. Also again, I don't typically use follow focusing in most of the videos that I do. I know there are plenty of filmmakers out there that will pull focus and will find this valuable. I just don't use it on a gimbal, but it's nice to know you can connect a follow focus if you choose to do so. Feiyu also does a direct interface to a variety of cameras. You have control of your cameras or over some of your camera's functions right here from the LCD screen. It's a nice touch and it too works very well. Now just one word of note, I've been using the AK-4500 with Sony's, and the default setting on the Sony cameras for a USB connection is on page 4 of the setup menu. You need to set the USB connection to PC remote. It's set to mass storage. At least that's the one that worked for me on the A7R Mark III. The other options kept locking the camera to check your connected device, and it just didn't work. It wouldn't let me activate the camera. I also found that the first couple times I had to go back to the menu and set the USB to PC remote again. I kept wanting to go back to auto or mass storage, and I really don't know why. And this was strictly with my A7R Mark III. But this remote control arm also allows for external monitors to be attached to your gimbal. I love all these attachment possibilities, but again, there's always that greater weight penalty every time you add something to the gimbal. I love it, but we're gonna be getting over 6 pounds. This isn't extremely heavy, but after about 20 or 30 minutes, it does take a toll on your arms and on your back. The last thing you're gonna wanna do when you first power up is check for the latest version of firmware. I absolutely love that I can update the firmware wirelessly via the app. It's kind of a game changer because it's much preferred over the previous methods of physically connecting wires and downloading a file from the internet, attaching to your computer. This is a whole lot less convoluted and just so much easier. The bottom line is setup, though a little bit more complicated with a few more steps than other gimbals that I've used in the past. Overall, it is in fact intuitive enough, but it does have a couple of quirks. But all in, for ease of setup, the AK-4500 gets a 9 out of 10. Next up is ease of operation. Okay, so we're balanced, we have the motor set, we have the control wheel set to move the gimbal up and down on the tilt axis. This is just a personal preference, but you can do that by pressing the control wheel here. If you press it once, it does the tilt. Press it a second time, it controls the pan. Press it a third time, it controls the roll. Pressing a fourth time, it goes back to tilt. So the camera is connected and the remote is connected on the back. I love that I can press record right from here, which is great. It makes using the gimbal a highly integrated and completely seamless experience. It kind of reminded me of the Smooth 4. I love it. And switching between the various modes, frankly, isn't quite as intuitive. To me, this touchscreen, it's nicely implemented from an operational standpoint, but it's not super intuitive to look at or clear as to which mode is which. I think Feiyu should do a firmware update with just the names of the different modes. It might be a better way to go than these graphics that I assume are trying to emulate application icons like on your phone. But these diagrams and graphics look more like hieroglyphics to me than they do actual modes. Personally, I'm most often using the pan follow in my real estate shoots, and it's likely the mode that you'll probably will be using most of the time as well. Fortunately, it's the default setting. The remote control arm adds an additional level of stability and control. I like using both hands, and I found that my footage, it just makes my footage look just that much smoother. The remote control has the same wheel, though it's a little bit less responsive than the one attached directly to the gimbal. There's a bit of a delay, and I'm assuming that's probably because of Bluetooth. You can also detach this remote control arm and move the gimbal with hand motions, and that's really cool. One last thing, you can in fact set the gimbal up to do a motion time lapse, and with up to 12 hours of battery life, you can probably do one of those nighttime star trail or star time lapses, in addition to generic motion time lapses. Oh, you can also do one-touch barrel rolls right here from the LCD panel. That's nice. Simply put, ease of operation is a joy, and I simply love the integration of the camera controls into the gimbal. It makes ease of use a truly seamless experience. So for ease of operation, the Feiyu gets a 9.5 out of 10. Next up is the quality of the results. And just like the latest cameras, the latest gimbals are simply bubbling over with new features. Many that add value, and many others that are actually targeted to specific needs of different filmmakers. At its very core, gimbals are all about smoothing out footage. And in this regard, the AK-4500 is very good, with one noticeable glitch that kind of kept driving me crazy, and I'll explain in a minute. Once I get over the initial bumps of setup and getting the motor adjustments correct and getting the remote control handle connected via Bluetooth, all the pieces of the AK-4500 started to fall into place, and this thing is just downright blissful most of the time. The one area that I ran into some difficulty with is, well, I like to do parallax type movements, and every now and again the pan motor seemed to grab and jerk the gimbal slightly during those movements. Now, I did all the recommended steps, updating the firmware, setting the power levels correctly, etc., but the problem persisted. The good news is I could fix it in post, but the end result wasn't quite as smooth and refined as many of the other gimbals that I've used and tested. Now, this may in fact be a defect with my specific gimbal, because I can't imagine this sort of thing would be normal. But that nit aside, as with all my reviews, rather than me telling you about the results, I'd rather just show you. The next 2 to 3 minutes will be a series of video clips showcasing the variety of moves a filmmaker can achieve with the Feiyu AK-4500. And if you're in the market for a new gimbal, I don't think the 4500 will let you down. Last up is value. And in the gimbal wars of today, competition amongst the various gimbal manufacturers has been a boom for filmmakers. When you think about it, it was just 3 or 4 years ago when we saw the real dawn of the handheld gimbal age. And it's truly astounding to see all these companies innovating and bringing new gimbals to the marketplace that have things like better build, more refinement, greater payloads, easier setup, Bluetooth connectivity, direct access to your camera's functions, etc., and all at lower and more competitive prices. The gimbal marketplace has literally become a commodity at a breathtaking pace. And in the gimbal wars, Feiyu Tech, in my opinion, has leapfrogged ahead with the AK-4500. And I also think we're getting a lot for our hard-earned dollar here as well. For $749, it seems like everything's included with the 4500. Follow focus, remote control, more cords to connect to more cameras than you can imagine, etc. And it all works so seamlessly, and it's just perfectly integrated once you get it set up. There were really only 3 downsides. The first one was when you added all these accessories, there was absolutely a weight penalty with the AK-4500. It approaches 5 pounds without a camera, and that gets really tiring, especially for something in the handheld category. There was also the nit that I had with the pan motor doing those parallax movements. It was grabbing, making the panning a little bit less smooth than I would like. And lastly, even though I love the touchscreen interface, it's not without its flaws either, because some of the icons that are supposed to represent different camera movements or different modes, they look more like hieroglyphics than they do meaningful icons. But apart from those nits, I think the AK4500 is a hit. And for value, it gets a 9.5 out of 10. To wrap up this review, we gave the Feiyu AK4500 a 46 out of 50 and our highly recommended rating. The final word. The gimbal marketplace, well, it's become an incredible place to shop for the best gimbals with the best features possible and all at competitive prices. As the market for gimbals has matured, manufacturers have had to up their game in order to compete. And so it goes with Feiyu's latest entrant into the gimbal marketplace, the AK4500. A gimbal overloaded with useful features, great build quality, but most importantly, it delivers where it counts, and that is smooth footage. And for the record, I'm giving my pan grabbing experience the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume that this problem was a problem with my specific gimbal and not a widespread problem with all of them. In the end, I believe the AK4500 will impress both filmmakers and their clients alike. At $749, it seems to me that the AK4500 is one of the new value leaders in the marketplace, given again everything that's included. I just wish Feiyu would clean up the visuals on the interface and the LCD, and hopefully they can with a firmware update. And for the next version, I hope Feiyu can somehow utilize lighter weight materials in the manufacture of the gimbal itself. Because pushing 5 pounds without a camera, the AK4500 is really pushing the definition of handheld gimbal device. I'm Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, based here in beautiful, sunny Southwest Florida. If you like videos like this, go ahead and give me a like, or better yet, subscribe. And until the next time, happy filming.